You've started another relationship. Maybe your third, maybe your fifth, and somewhere around month 6, maybe a year in, something shifted. You can't name it. You can't point to the moment. There was no single fight that broke it. No betrayal you could trace. Just a slow drift, like 2 boats tied to the same dock and someone cut one of the ropes while you were sleeping. And by the time you noticed, the distance was already too wide to swim. And you've done this more than once, and every time you walked away, you asked yourself the same question. Is it me? Is there something wrong with me? Am I the reason every relationship I start eventually falls apart? Maybe you've said it out loud to a friend. Maybe you've just sat with it in the dark. Maybe you've prayed about it and felt like the answer wasn't coming. Maybe you've stopped praying about it because you didn't know what you were asking for anymore. I'm going to tell you something that nobody in your life is equipped to tell you. It's not you. Not entirely. Not in the way you're thinking. And I'm not saying that to hand you a reason to avoid accountability or to refuse to look at what your own patterns might be. Self-examination matters. But what I'm about to walk you through is something that exists completely outside of your patterns. Something that was running against you before you made a single decision in any of those relationships. I know this because I built those situations. I designed the collapses. I documented them. My name's Nick. I grew up in a rural area, the kind of place where the nearest thing to culture is a Walmart an hour away and a church on every corner of the main road. My dad left when I was 11. My mom remarried twice, both bad. By the time I was 14, the house I lived in was the last place I wanted to be. I found an escape in music, heavy stuff, death metal, black metal, and through the music, I found older guys who seemed to have answers I couldn't find at home or in church. By the time I was 17, I'd been recruited into something. It didn't call itself Satanism at first. It called itself a brotherhood, a community, people who understood things most people couldn't handle. By the time I was 20, I understood exactly what it was. And by the time I was 22, relationship assignments were my specialty. I was assigned to Christians specifically, believers in active faith, with genuine covenant potential. My job was to ensure that the relationships they were building, relationships that God was blessing, relationships that had genuine destiny attached to them, came apart before they could become what they were supposed to be. I did this for 12 years. I documented over 160 targets. I watched marriages end, engagements dissolve, and good people walk away from genuinely right partners, convinced they had made the wrong choice. And not one of them, not a single person I was assigned against, ever knew what was actually happening. Tonight I'm going to show you exactly how those assignments operate. And more importantly, I'm going to show you how to break them. There are 3 mechanisms I want to walk you through. Each one is distinct. Each one targets a different point of vulnerability in a relationship, and each one has a specific counter. I didn't know any of this until years after I got out. But what I know now, I'm not keeping to myself. Let me start with the first one. The first mechanism is called the intimacy fracture. Here's what most people get wrong about relationship assignments. They assume the attack comes when things are hard. When there's pressure on the finances or conflict over kids or infidelity, they think the enemy waits for a crack and slides in through it. That's not how the protocol works. That's not what I was trained to do. The intimacy fracture is placed at the beginning, not at month 8, month 2, the honeymoon phase, when both people are still showing up with their best selves, when the walls are down, when something real is actually forming. Why then? Because in the early stages of a God-aligned relationship, there is a spiritual knitting that happens between 2 people. Something opens that doesn't open easily and doesn't close easily either. A channel forms. The way 2 people begin to know each other, really know each other underneath the surface, that happens through something that's visible in the spirit. And our instructions were to get inside that channel before it finished forming. The intimacy fracture doesn't create fights. I want to make sure you hear that. It doesn't create obvious conflict. It creates invisible distance. A slow, creeping disconnection that has no identifiable source. He says something sincere and she doesn't receive it the way he meant it. She shares something vulnerable and he responds correctly but without the resonance she needed. No offense, no fight, just a subtle dimming, like a radio station starting to drift off frequency. Still music, still recognizable, but something's off and you can't put your finger on what. And month by month, that drift becomes the reality of the relationship, until one of them says, "I think we just might not be right for each other. I can't explain it. Something just feels off." I documented that phrase in my notes more than 40 times. 40 different people, different cities, different backgrounds, different relationships. Same phrase. because they were experiencing the same thing. An assignment I placed. Let me tell you about a man I'll call Gary. Gary was 53 when I was sent against him. He ran a small landscaping crew in a rural suburb. Just him and 2 other guys he had hired from his church. He was a deacon, faithful, had been through 2 marriages that ended within 3 years each, both times without dramatic incident, both times with that slow, unexplainable dissolve. He had started a 3rd relationship with a woman I'll call Sandra, a widow, 2 adult kids, a genuine believer who had lost her husband to cancer and had spent 4 years rebuilding. His pastor told him this was the one God had set aside for him. His pastor was right, and in the organization we had a term for that. We called it a confirmed covenant target. When a higher-up confirmed that what was forming between 2 people had spiritual weight, that it wasn't just a relationship but something with genuine destiny tied to it, that target moved up the priority list. Not because they were weak or easy to break, because what they were building together mattered. That's exactly why I was assigned to Gary. I placed the intimacy fracture during month 2 of that relationship, right in the middle of when everything felt easiest. I identified what I called in my notes the primary bonding channel between them, the thing they connected over most deeply. Both of them had spent their adult lives feeling fundamentally unseen. In each other, for the first time, they found somebody who actually saw them. That recognition, that quality of being truly known, that was the core of what was forming between them. That was the channel I targeted. I introduced a static, a spiritual interference, nothing that would register as a fight or an offense, just a slight disruption in the transmission. He would open up about something real, and she would receive it, but something in the translation was off. She would be tender, and he would respond with warmth, but it was arriving to her a few degrees cooler than what he sent. Nothing wrong on the surface, everything subtly wrong underneath. By month 5, Gary told his pastor he was concerned. "I can't explain it," he said. "She's a great woman. I believe she loves God. But something is off between us, and I don't know what it is." His pastor encouraged them to pursue counseling. They agreed. And here's where it got interesting for me. Counseling wouldn't have been a problem. I've seen counseling go completely sideways in assignment cases. The counselor helps them communicate better. They start feeling more hopeful, and then the assignment hits harder in a different spot. I wasn't worried about counseling. What I didn't account for was Sandra. Sandra had a prayer habit she had developed after her husband died. Every morning before she got out of bed, she prayed one sentence out loud. Not a long prayer, not a warfare declaration, not even something she'd describe as deep or theological. Just this: "Lord, let everything hidden in this relationship be made visible today." She had been praying that prayer every morning for 11 years. She didn't think of it as spiritual warfare. It was just the way she started her day. A request for clarity, a request for honesty, a request that nothing operate in the dark. That prayer was a problem for me. The intimacy fracture operates specifically through hiddenness. The static has to remain invisible to function. Sandra was praying every morning for visibility over the relationship, not just about Gary, about everything in the relationship, including what I had placed there. I ran the assignment 4 separate times over the following 3 months. Each time it would begin to settle and then lose traction within 2 weeks. I escalated. I brought in additional layers. Nothing held. I filed the report. My handler reviewed it. Closed the file without explanation. They got married that fall. I went home that night and sat with that case for a long time, because I had never had a case close on me like that before. Not because of something dramatic or powerful, because of one sentence. 11 years every morning before getting out of bed. What I learned from Gary and Sandra is this: the intimacy fracture requires hiddenness to operate. It cannot sustain itself in a relationship where one or both people are consistently, specifically, out loud requesting that hidden things be made visible. That prayer is not a weapon, it's a condition. It establishes a spiritual environment where the assignment can't breathe. One sentence every morning out loud, that's the counter to the first mechanism. Now I need to stop here for a second, because what I just walked you through, I want to make sure it landed. You just learned that this assignment doesn't arrive when things are hard. It arrives when things are still good, in the place where you're most open, most hopeful, most unguarded. And it doesn't operate through conflict. It operates through invisible disconnection that feels completely real from the inside. And if you're sitting there right now thinking, that is my life, that is exactly what happens to me, not once and every time, I need you to hear me clearly. That is not a character flaw, that is not a spiritual failure. That is a specific mechanism that has been running on your relationships, probably for years, that has never been broken, I'm not done. There are 2 more mechanisms I need to show you, and what comes next is heavier. But right now there is a resource I need to point you toward. It's called Destroying Assignments, the 14-day deliverance protocol. I didn't write it. I want to be clear about that. Believers who came out of exactly what you're living built it out of their own breakthrough. 14 days, specific prayers, specific declarations, specific daily actions tied to specific assignment types, including relationship assignments. I have talked to people who were in their 3rd, 4th collapsed relationship, people who genuinely loved God and genuinely kept ending up in the same place. They went through that 14 days and something broke. Not just emotionally, spiritually the pattern stopped. But not everyone does it, and the people who hear about it understand it and then wait. They're in the same place 6 months later. Because this thing doesn't wait. It doesn't pause while you process. The assignment was placed before the relationship even started. Waiting to respond only gives it more time to cement. The link is in the description. Click it. Read it. Decide. Now let me show you the 2nd mechanism. The 2nd one is what I was trained to call the echo chamber protocol. This one operates differently from the intimacy fracture. Where the fracture works through silence and disconnection, the echo chamber works through amplification. Here's the principle. Every relationship has friction, small disagreements, mismatched expectations, words said wrong when somebody's tired. That's not a problem. In a healthy relationship, those moments get processed. Maybe they cause a little pain, but they pass. They don't define the relationship. They're weather, uncomfortable while it's happening, but it moves through. The echo chamber protocol targets those friction points specifically, and it amplifies them, not externally, internally, inside one or both people. Here's how it works. The assignment plants itself at the intersection of memory and emotion. And what it does is this. Every time a small offense happens in the current relationship, and I mean small, the kind of thing that wouldn't matter to a person in a healthy emotional state, the assignment pulls in every previous offense the person has ever experienced, not just in this relationship, in every relationship, going back as far as there are wounds to pull from: the absent parent, the critical ex, the friend who disappeared, the teacher who humiliated them, every wound that ever made them feel unloved, unseen, disposable. The assignment attaches all of that to the small current moment. So a partner makes a careless comment on a Thursday afternoon. Nothing major, a dismissive tone, an offhand remark. And instead of the other person feeling mildly stung and letting it pass, they feel something enormous, something that has no proportion to what actually happened. Because the echo chamber activated everything behind it. From the inside it feels like sudden clarity. This is the same as before. This is the same thing that always happens. This is who this person really is. But it isn't clarity. It's the assignment feeding 4 decades of pain through a 5-second moment. And the person doesn't know that's what's happening, so they try to manage it. Because most Christian couples are taught to be forgiving, to not make big deals out of small things. They push it down. They manage the reaction. They tell themselves to be mature about it. And it sits there, unspoken, compounding, until something small breaks the dam. And then the partner on the other end, who had no idea how much had been building, experiences a reaction that makes no sense relative to anything they actually did. And from their perspective, the person they love has just become unrecognizable. That gap is what breaks trust, not the original offense, the inexplicable reaction to it. The echo chamber doesn't need you to have a bad relationship. It doesn't need your partner to do anything wrong. It weaponizes normal human friction, the kind that every relationship has, and turns it into evidence of something it was never evidence of. That's what makes it effective, and what makes it so hard to trace. The person experiencing it doesn't feel like they're under attack. They feel like they're finally seeing clearly. Here's what I'll also tell you about this mechanism. It is most effective on people who have done healing work. A healed person is an open person. They've lowered defenses they no longer need. And openness is the precise environment the echo chamber requires. It needs a person who is genuinely letting someone in, because that's when small moments carry weight. The fully armored person, still behind walls of unprocessed pain, doesn't give the assignment the access it needs. But the person who has done the work, who has genuinely opened up, that's the one we targeted with this. Let me tell you about a couple I'll call James and Michelle. James was 47, former military, ran a small auto repair shop he had built from nothing over 15 years. Michelle was 44, a school administrator, raised in the church, deeply prayerful. They had been together 2 years when I was assigned to James specifically. The assignment on him was not the echo chamber by design. It was actually a different assignment targeting his business. But in the course of monitoring him, I identified something about Michelle that made her a secondary target. She had been hurt badly in her previous marriage. A long story. Her ex had been unfaithful, then dismissive about it, then absent. She had done real healing work. She had prayed through it. She had genuinely forgiven as much as a person can, but the wounds were still there in the memory structure, even if they weren't active. The echo chamber protocol doesn't need an active wound. It needs an accessible wound. Even a healed one can be accessed if the entry point is precise enough. I placed it on Michelle at the midpoint of their second year together, when they were starting to talk seriously about engagement. The timing was deliberate. Engagement was a covenant threshold. Past it, the assignment would need to escalate dramatically to succeed. I needed to create a break before they crossed it. It took about 6 weeks to see results. James came home late one night, genuinely late. Job ran over, nothing else going on. He was tired and a little distant. He didn't communicate as warmly as usual, nothing serious. But Michelle felt the echo chamber activate. Her ex's dismissiveness came flooding in through that small moment. Not as a memory she was accessing consciously. As a certainty she felt in her body. He's pulling back, I've been here before. I know how this ends. She didn't say anything that night, but the next morning she was different, cooler, more guarded. James noticed and didn't know what had happened. He tried to ask. She minimized it. And that back and forth, her feeling something enormous, him confused about where it came from, ran for about 3 weeks before their first real fight. The fight was not about anything real. It was about the dishes. But the echo chamber turned it into everything Michelle had ever survived. Now I'll tell you what stopped the echo chamber from destroying that relationship, because it didn't succeed. James and Michelle did get engaged, and they did get married. And I know this because I stayed connected to this case much longer than I should have. What happened was this. Michelle's pastor had given her a practice, not a prayer specifically, but a habit, of asking herself one question before responding to any emotional reaction that felt disproportionate. Is this moment, or is this memory? Is what I'm feeling connected to what's happening right now, or is it coming from somewhere else? Michelle had been trained to ask this question not as spiritual warfare, but as emotional health practice. She'd been using it for years, and she had gotten good at it. The night the echo chamber was most active in her, the night she felt the most certainty that James was becoming her ex-husband, she asked herself that question, and she had enough practice to recognize, this is memory. This is not this moment. She sat with it instead of reacting. She prayed over it quietly, and by morning the certainty had lost most of its grip. I monitored her for 8 more months. That habit, that one question, asked consistently before responding to a disproportionate reaction, broke the echo chamber's traction every time I ran it. The counter to the second mechanism is not a dramatic warfare prayer, it's a habit of distinction. The ability to ask, in real time, is this moment or is this memory? And to wait for an honest answer before acting on the feeling. Now, if any of this is landing, if you recognize the echo chamber in a relationship you're in right now, or one you've been through, I want you to participate in something. In the comments, write this. I break the echo chamber assignment over my life in Jesus' name. Don't just think it. Write it out. There is something that happens when a declaration is made in writing, publicly, a participation that matters in the spirit realm. I've seen this happen when people participate together. Participate now. Write it out. Now let me get into the third mechanism, and this is the one that bothered me more than any other, because this one isn't placed on a person or on a relationship. It's placed on a season. The protocol I was trained in called this the timing seal. Here's the concept. In the spirit, there are what I learned to identify as covenant windows, specific periods of time, they're not permanent, when a person's situation, calling, and spiritual alignment make them ready to receive the God-ordained relationship that's been prepared for them. These windows have a spiritual component. They don't stay open forever. And closing them is exactly what the timing seal is designed to do. But here's the part that makes this assignment different from the other two. The timing seal doesn't operate inside the relationship. It operates before the relationship begins. The strategy is this. Identify when the window is opening, and make sure that by the time it arrives, the person is in no condition to receive what's coming through it. So we would run a series of smaller assignments in the months leading up to the window. Nothing that would seem connected, nothing that would look like a pattern from the outside. A painful friendship that ended without explanation, 6 months before the window opened. A brief romantic disappointment that left the person doubting their own judgment. A slow-building loneliness that hardened over time into a self-protective wall the person started calling discernment. And then the window would open, and the right person would arrive. Someone genuinely sent. Someone who, if the timing seal wasn't running, the person would have recognized immediately. But because of what we had done in the lead-up, the accumulated wounds, the manufactured mistrust, the false discernment, they couldn't see it clearly, and so they dismissed it. They walked away from something God had sent, convinced they were being spiritually cautious, when what they were actually doing was rejecting the gift, because we had made them unable to receive it. Let me tell you about a woman I'll call Paula. Paula was 39 when my team ran a strategic assessment on her. She was an administrator at a non-profit, single, had been praying for a covenant relationship for years, genuinely believed God had one for her. The assessment confirmed what she believed. She was in an active covenant window, a roughly 18-month period in which everything in her life was positioned for that relationship to begin. We ran 4 assignments across those 18 months. The first assignment was a church conflict, a painful falling out with people she trusted, which left her suspicious of Christian community and less likely to place herself in the relational environments where she might naturally encounter the right person. The second assignment amplified a pattern of abandonment. A close friendship she had ended for no reason the friend could explain, leaving Paula with a sense that the people who got closest to her eventually left. The third was the echo chamber protocol, placed inside a brief relationship she had in month 9 of the window. It didn't need to destroy that relationship. It just needed to activate enough old pain that she came out of it feeling fundamentally unlovable. By month 14, Paula had built a wall around herself. She called it discernment. She was more cautious than she had ever been in her life. She told her pastor she was trusting God to bring someone if he wanted to, which sounds spiritual, but in practice meant she was not letting anyone in. Month 16, a man entered her life. Grounded, faithful, unhurried, actually sent. She told her pastor he didn't feel right. The window closed at month 18. I want to say something careful here, because I'm aware of how that story lands. I'm not telling it to produce hopelessness. I'm telling it because I know what happened to Paula after that window closed, and it matters. 2 years later, Paula was at a prayer retreat. Something shifted during worship. She described it as a weight lifting off her chest that she hadn't known she was carrying. She went home that night and spent 3 hours in prayer. And she said that during those 3 hours, she became aware of a specific pattern. Every relationship she had walked away from for the same reason. A feeling she couldn't trust what she was seeing. She started praying specifically about that. Not, Lord, send me someone, but Lord, show me what I cannot receive. Show me what I keep closing the door on and why. She prayed that prayer every morning for 7 months. In month 8, she met someone. And this time, she didn't walk away. They have been married for 6 years. Now I need to take a minute here because there is something I need to be straight with you about before I continue. YouTube shut us down. Monetization, memberships, donations, all of it gone. They did this to thousands of channels that expose what the enemy does not want exposed. I know exactly what a silencing assignment looks like. I've built them. This is one. We are not quitting. This channel stays right here. We will keep posting. More, not less. But we also set up a private community on Patreon for what we cannot do on YouTube. No platform gets to decide when God's work stops. As a witness, you get exclusive spiritual warfare content, real confessions, strategic polls, discussions that most believers will never see. As a confessor, you get everything in the witness level, plus a monthly personal consultation, delivered as a detailed PDF, identifying the exact assignment operating against your situation, how it was built, and the specific steps to destroy it. And if you used to support this channel through memberships or donations, you can still do that inside the Patreon community. The enemy took that access from YouTube. He does not get to take it from a space he cannot touch. The link is in the description. Do not wait. The enemy does not wait. Now let me tell you something about how we selected targets, because this part is important. Inside the organization, we did not select Christians for relationship assignments randomly. There was an assessment protocol, a set of criteria. And understanding those criteria reveals something about who the enemy considers most worth targeting, and why. The first criterion was an active prayer life, specifically intercession. This will seem backward to most people. You'd think that a person who prays would be a lower priority target because their prayers would make the assignment harder to run. In the short term, that's partially true. But we were always playing a longer game than most people realize. We weren't just trying to stop one relationship. We were trying to stop what a relationship would eventually produce. And a covenant between two genuinely praying people produces something in the spirit that I'm not able to fully describe from the outside. But I saw the results of it enough times to take it very seriously. Two people in a healthy, God-aligned covenant, praying together and agreeing together. That combination operates with a kind of spiritual force that our higher-ups specifically flagged as something to interrupt before it could establish itself. We did not ignore praying people. We prioritized them. The second criterion was a history of genuine healing. A person who has genuinely healed from past wounds has, in the process, lowered defenses they no longer need. And an open person can receive more, but they're also more accessible. The timing seal, specifically, is most effective in people who have done enough healing to be ready, but not enough warfare to recognize what the pre-window assignments are doing. The third criterion was an active calling. We paid specific attention to people who had an identified calling, not just a desire for a good life, but a sense of purpose connected to something larger. A ministry gift, a leadership role, a genuine sense that they were meant to build something for God. Because when two called people enter covenant, their callings accelerate each other. We were instructed to interrupt that multiplication before it could begin, because what it produces, when it's not interrupted, is genuinely threatening to everything we were doing. If you are a praying person, a person who has done healing work, a person who carries a calling, you are a primary target for relationship assignments. Not because you are weak, because what God is building through you matters. Now participate with me. Write this in the comments. I am called, and my covenant is covered in Jesus' name. Write it out. That's a declaration and a participation. Don't scroll past it. Now I need to tell you something I've never said fully on this channel. For 12 years, I ran relationship assignments on Christians. What I haven't told you is that I was also running one on my own marriage without knowing it. My wife and I got together when I was 25. She was a believer. I was not, or I thought I wasn't. I was in the organization, but I kept those two lives completely separate in my own mind, which tells you a lot about where I was spiritually. We had 2 kids. We had a house in a suburb, the kind of place with a yard and a neighborhood and everything that looks like a good life from the outside. What I didn't understand, and didn't understand for a long time, was that everything I had been trained to do to other people's relationships, I was doing it inside my own home. Not as an assignment, not on purpose, but the patterns I had developed in 12 years of deliberately fracturing intimacy, amplifying conflict and creating emotional distance. Those patterns don't stay in a box. They become the way you move in the world. I kept emotional distance from my wife, the same way I kept distance from targets. I treated vulnerability as a weakness to be managed, rather than something to move toward. I monitored her the way I monitored the people I was assigned against, looking for pressure points, watching her reactions, calculating instead of connecting. I never named it that way at the time. I thought I was just being careful, being private, being strong. What I was doing was living the intimacy fracture from the inside of my own marriage, not through any dramatic betrayal, through precisely what I had been trained to do to other people's relationships. The emotional distance, the monitoring instead of connecting, the treating of intimacy as a vulnerability rather than something to move toward. I had absorbed those patterns so thoroughly through the work I was doing that I was living them inside my own home without realizing it. My wife was going to a church I refused to attend, praying at night after I was asleep, staying. She told me later that there were years when she asked God every single night whether she should leave. And every single night, she said she felt a quiet answer that she was to stay and pray. So that's what she did. For 4 years, in the middle of the period when I was most deeply involved in the organization, she prayed the same prayer every night. God, whatever is covering my husband, remove it. I don't need to understand what it is. Just remove it. She never told me she was praying that. She didn't have language for what she was praying against. She just prayed it. The night I walked out of the organization, something happened that I don't have good language for even now. I was not the same man at the end of that night as I was at the beginning of it. I drove home. It was after midnight. I came in and sat at the kitchen table, and she came downstairs and looked at me and didn't say anything for a long time, and then she said, "Are you done?" She didn't know what she was asking. Not specifically, but she was asking it. And I said yes. She told me about the prayer 3 months later. 4 years of the same request every night, not knowing what she was praying against. I sat with that for a long time, because I know what that prayer was doing. I know what a consistent, specific, out-loud nightly declaration does in the spirit over an extended period. I've watched it dismantle things I placed with precision. I've seen it outlast assignments I built to run for decades, and she had been doing it faithfully for 4 years, without any visible evidence it was working. That is the kind of faith that breaks things. And if I'm standing here today, talking to you, it is because of what she did in the dark. I want to say something directly to anyone watching who is in a relationship that feels like it's dying from the inside, or who has been through relationship after relationship and cannot understand why they keep ending up in the same place. Before you accept the narrative that you're just not built for this, before you conclude that you chose wrong, or that God doesn't have someone for you, or that you're too broken for covenant to work, consider the possibility that what you're carrying has a name, and what has a name can be broken. The intimacy fracture, the echo chamber protocol, the timing seal. These are not abstract spiritual concepts. These are real mechanisms, running in real people's lives right now, producing real pain that feels completely personal and completely unexplainable at the same time. They can be broken. I've watched them break. I watched one break because a woman prayed one sentence every morning for 11 years. I watched another break because a man learned to ask himself one question before responding. I watched a third break because a woman prayed specifically about the pattern, not just the outcome, for 7 months. And I watched my own break because my wife prayed the same prayer every night for 4 years. Specific, consistent, out loud, faithful, when there was no visible return. That's what breaks these things. Let me bring it all together. 3 mechanisms, 3 distinct entry points. 1 underlying principle. Demonic relationship assignments operate through hiddenness, amplification, and timing interference. And they are all disrupted by specific, consistent, spoken prayer directed at the specific area of attack. The intimacy fracture is broken by daily declaration, requesting that everything hidden in the relationship be made visible. Not a long prayer, not a warfare sermon, 1 sentence, out loud, every morning. That condition, specifically created, consistently renewed, is an environment the intimacy fracture cannot sustain. The echo chamber protocol is broken by the consistent practice of distinguishing between what belongs to the present moment and what belongs to memory, and praying specifically over what the assignment is pulling in from the past. Before responding to a reaction that feels too big for what actually happened, pause and ask, is this moment or is this memory? That question, asked honestly, breaks the amplification loop every time it's applied. The timing seal is broken by praying specifically about the pattern you're living in, not just asking for a relationship, but asking God to show you what you're being protected from versus what you're falsely avoiding. Paula's prayer wasn't, Lord, send me someone. It was, Lord, show me what I keep closing the door on, and why. That distinction matters. The timing seal needs you to stay in the pattern. Praying about the pattern directly is what dismantles it. And if you recognize yourself in all 3, if you felt the invisible disconnection, the disproportionate reactions, the sense that you keep missing the right season, that's not failure. That's a documented attack on something God intends to establish. And what has been attacked can be reclaimed. If you want the complete protocol, 14 days, specific prayers, specific declarations, specific actions matched to each assignment type, that's in Destroying Assignments. The link is in the description. It was built by people who came out of exactly what you're living, people who prayed through it and came out the other side. Before I pray, one more thing. Leave 1 word in the comments that describes what you're believing God for right now in your relationships. Just 1 word. Covenant, healing, clarity, restoration. Whatever it is, declare it. Participation matters. Let me pray. Father, I lift up every person watching this right now. I know what they've been through. I know the questions they've asked themselves in the dark. I know how many times they've rebuilt hope and watched it come apart again. I speak against every relationship assignment running against them right now. The intimacy fracture, broken. The echo chamber protocol, shattered. The timing seal, destroyed. Every hidden thing operating against their covenant, I declare it exposed and dismantled in Jesus' name right now. I declare that the covenant you designed for them has not been revoked. It has been interrupted. And the interruption ends here. Father, restore to them the years the assignments have taken. Give them clarity where the echo chamber gave them confusion. Give them openness where the timing seal built walls. Give them visibility where the intimacy fracture created static. Let every person who participated in this video today receive what you intended for them before any of this started. In Jesus' name, amen. My name's Nick. I grew up in a rural area, the kind of place where you could disappear and nobody would come looking. I came from a broken home. I found something that looked like brotherhood, and it pulled me into 12 years of doing things I can never fully undo. But God. He pulled me out. He gave me back a marriage I had nearly destroyed from the inside out. And he gave me a reason to stand here and tell you what I know. You are not too broken for covenant. The pattern is not permanent. The assignment has a name, and what has a name can be broken. From the pit to the cross. See you in the next one.